The massive doors of the Zephyrian imperial court groaned open with a sound that echoed through the crystalline halls like thunder. Ambassador Marcus Chun stepped through the threshold, his boots clicking against the polished obsidian floor. Around him, the court fell silent. Hundreds of alien dignitaries from across the known galaxy turned their varied forms of eyes, sensors, and perception organs toward the lone human figure. Marcus had prepared for this moment for 3 years. The weight of humanity's future rested on his shoulders as he walked the seemingly endless path toward the celestial throne. On either side of the Grand Hall, representatives from dozens of species whispered among themselves in languages that sounded like music, static, and phenomena that human ears could barely comprehend. The Zephyrian Empire controlled this entire sector of space. Their technology was millennia ahead of anything humans had developed. Their ships could cross galactic distances in days where human vessels took months. Their weapons could crack planets, and their shields could withstand the fury of dying stars. For a species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel, humanity was nothing more than a curiosity to them. Princess Zyra sat upon the celestial throne, a magnificent structure that seemed to be carved from a single piece of living starlight. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are. Her skin shimmered with an opalescent quality that shifted between silver and deep blue. Forearms extended from her elegant torso, each ending in hands that moved with hypnotic grace. Her head bore no hair, but instead crowned with what looked like crystalline formations that pulsed with soft bioluminescence. Most striking were her eyes, completely black orbs that seemed to contain swirling galaxies within their depths. Marcus had studied every available recording of Princess Zyra. She was known throughout the galaxy not just for her beauty, but for her intellect and ruthlessness. At only 2 centuries old, barely an adult by Zephyrian standards, she had already orchestrated the peaceful annexation of 7-star systems and personally led military campaigns that brought 3 more under imperial control. She spoke 47 languages fluently and was considered one of the foremost tactical minds of her generation. As Marcus approached the throne, he could feel the weight of countless stares. The court was filled with species he had only read about in xenobiology reports. Tall, insectoid Crothan with their metallic exoskeletons clicked mandibles in what might have been amusement. Floating ethereals, beings of pure energy contained within geometric force fields, hummed with frequencies that made his teeth ache. Massive Gornian traders, each one the size of a small building, shifted their rocky forms and created small earthquakes with every movement. But it was the Zephyrians themselves who commanded the most attention. They moved through the court like living art, their forms seeming to shift and flow as if they were made of liquid mercury, given shape and purpose. Each one was unique in their crystalline crown formations and the patterns of light that played across their skin. They were ancient, wise, and utterly convinced of their superiority over all other forms of life. Marcus stopped exactly 30 feet from the throne, as protocol demanded. He wore the formal diplomatic uniform of the United Earth government, a simple but well-tailored dark blue outfit with minimal ornamentation. Compared to the flowing robes, energy fields, and exotic materials worn by the other delegates, he looked almost primitive. Princess Zyra regarded him for a long moment before speaking. When she did, her voice carried easily across the vast hall without any apparent effort. It was melodious and somehow seemed to come from multiple directions at once. "So," she said, her tone carrying just a hint of amusement, "the young species has finally decided to formally introduce itself to the galaxy. Tell me, human, what brings your kind before the celestial throne? What could a species that has barely learned to leave its birth system possibly offer the Zephyrian Empire?" The court rippled with sounds that Marcus had learned to recognize as alien laughter. The Crothan's mandible clicking grew more rapid and sharp. The ethereal's humming took on harmonics that suggested mirth. Even some of the Zephyrian courtiers allowed small smiles to grace their perfect features. Marcus had expected this. Every briefing, every simulation, every possible scenario the Earth Diplomatic Corps had run suggested that humanity would be received with condescension at best. The galaxy was old, and the species that dominated it had been playing these games for millions of years. Humanity was the newcomer, the primitive upstart that had stumbled onto the cosmic stage wearing crude clothes and speaking in simple words. "Your Celestial Majesty," Marcus began, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "Humanity comes before the Empire not to offer material wealth or advanced technology. We understand that in these areas, we are far behind the established civilizations of the galaxy." Another wave of amused sounds rippled through the court. Princess Zyra leaned forward slightly in her throne, one of her four hands making a gesture that Marcus recognized as encouragement to continue. "Instead," Marcus said, "we offer something that we believe has value beyond mere technological advancement. We offer our perspective, our creativity, and our unique approach to problem solving. We offer alliance and friendship to a galaxy that has perhaps grown too comfortable with the way things have always been done." This time, the sound from the court were different. Some delegates made noises that suggested skepticism or outright disbelief. Others seemed genuinely curious about what the human might say next. Princess Zyra's expression shifted slightly. Her galaxy-filled eyes seemed to focus more intently on Marcus. "Our perspective?" she repeated, her voice carrying a note of incredulity. "Human, your species has existed for less than 1% of the time that the Zephyrian Empire has graced this galaxy with its presence. Your civilization has been spacefaring for barely a century. Your most advanced vessels move at speeds that our children's toys surpass. What perspective could you possibly offer that we have not already considered and discarded as inadequate millennia ago?" The court fell completely silent. This was clearly a moment of significance. Marcus could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Everything that happened in the next few minutes would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the fate of his entire species. He took a breath and looked directly into Princess Zyra's swirling black eyes. "Your Majesty, if I may, I believe the very fact that you ask that question demonstrates exactly the perspective that humanity can offer." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the hall from several species. To question or challenge a member of the imperial family in open court was considered either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Often both. Princess Zyra's four hands stilled completely. The bioluminescent crown on her head pulsed once, very brightly, and then settled into a steady, intense glow. "Elaborate," she said, and her voice carried a warning that was felt rather than heard. Marcus straightened his shoulders. He had come too far to back down now. "Your Majesty, you mentioned that your empire has existed for millions of years. In that time, you have encountered thousands of species, conquered countless worlds, and accumulated knowledge and technology that spans the breadth of cosmic possibility. This is an incredible achievement that humanity respects and admires." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The court remained absolutely silent. But Marcus continued, "In all that time, with all that power and knowledge, how many truly new solutions have emerged? How many genuine innovations have you discovered? Not improvements on existing technology, not refinements of ancient wisdom, but completely new ways of thinking about old problems." Princess Zyra's expression was unreadable, but Marcus noticed that the other courtiers were beginning to shift uncomfortably. He was treading on dangerous ground, but he pressed forward. "Humanity may be young and primitive by your standards, Your Majesty, but youth brings something that age often loses: the ability to see familiar problems with completely fresh eyes. We don't know what's impossible because we haven't been told yet. We don't accept that something can't be done just because it never has been before." The princess rose from her throne with fluid grace. At her full height, She towered over Marcus by at least 2 feet. The crystalline formations on her head caught the light from the chamber's energy sources and cast prismatic patterns across the walls. She descended the steps slowly, each movement deliberate and precise. "You speak of fresh perspectives and new solutions," she said as she approached. "These are easy words to say, human. But this galaxy is not a classroom where untested theories and juvenile enthusiasm are sufficient. This is reality, where the consequences of failure can be measured in the extinction of entire civilizations." Marcus held his ground as she stopped just arm's length away. Up close, he could see that her opalescent skin seemed to contain depths that went far deeper than should have been physically possible. The effect was hypnotic and slightly disorienting. "You claim that your species can offer solutions to problems that have challenged the greatest minds in galactic history," the princess continued. "Yet you stand before me wearing primitive armor that our children could penetrate, carrying weapons that would barely scratch our training equipment, and representing a civilization that has not even mastered the basic principles of gravity manipulation." She gestured with one of her hands, and Marcus felt a strange, tingling sensation across his body. When he looked down, he saw that his diplomatic uniform was glowing faintly with an energy field that the princess had somehow projected onto him. "This is what passes for your most advanced protective technology," she said, and her voice carried clearly to every corner of the massive hall. "Our preliminary scans show that it would provide minimal protection against even the most basic energy weapons. The material is crude, the design is inefficient, and the underlying principles are so primitive that our historians would need to consult archives from our pre-industrial period to find comparable examples." The court erupted in sounds that were unmistakably laughter. The Crothin's mandible clicking became a rapid staccato that echoed off the crystalline walls. The ethereal's humming rose to frequencies that made the air itself seem to vibrate with mirth. Even in normally dignified Zephyrian courtiers allowed themselves expressions of open amusement. Marcus felt heat rising his cheeks, but he maintained his composure. The princess was making a show of humiliating him in front of the entire galactic diplomatic community. This was clearly intended as more than just political theater. It was a demonstration of humanity's place in the cosmic hierarchy. Furthermore, Princess Zara continued, walking slowly around Marcus as if examining a curious specimen. "Your species' approach to space travel is so inefficient that it borders on the comical. You still rely on reaction-based propulsion systems that our civilization abandoned when we were barely more advanced than you are now. Your vessels require months to cross distances that our ships traverse in hours. Your navigation systems are so primitive that you cannot even plot courses through regions of space that we consider routine shipping lanes." Marcus remained motionless as she completed her circuit and stood before him again. The energy field she had projected onto his uniform was growing brighter, and he could feel a slight warmth against his skin. "And yet," the princess said, her voice dropping to a tone that somehow carried just as clearly throughout the hall, "you stand before the celestial throne and claim that your species, your young, primitive, technologically inferior species, can offer solutions to challenges that have occupied the greatest minds of the galaxy for millennia." She paused, and in that moment of silence, Marcus realized that this was his moment. Everything that had led to this point, the years of preparation, the political maneuvering to even get humanity an audience with the Empire, the hopes and fears of billions of humans across dozens of worlds. All of it came down to what he said and did in the next few minutes. "Tell me, human," Princess Zura said, her galaxy-filled eyes boring into his, "what could your species possibly accomplish that we could not do better, faster, and with greater efficiency?" The court held its collective breath. Marcus could feel the weight of countless alien gazes focused on him. This was the culmination of the princess's demonstration, the moment when he would either justify his species' audacious claims or be revealed as just another primitive fool who had overestimated his own importance. Marcus looked around the vast hall, taking in the magnificent architecture, the exotic alien delegates, and the casual display of technologies that humanity could barely comprehend. Then, he looked back at Princess Zara, meeting her swirling black gaze directly. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "may I ask you a question?" The princess's crystalline crown pulsed once with surprise. "You stand accused of making claims you cannot support, and your response is to ask questions?" "Just one question, Your Majesty, and I believe the answer will demonstrate exactly what humanity can offer that no other species in this galaxy has been able to provide." Princess Zyra regarded him for a long moment. Then she gestured with one of her hands in what Marcus had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a shrug. "Ask your question, human. But understand that when it fails to impress, this audience will be concluded, and your species will be formally classified as a minor civilization with no special status or consideration." Marcus nodded. "I understand the stakes, Your Majesty." He paused, organizing his thoughts. "My question is this. In all the millions of years of the Zephyrian Empire's existence, with all your advanced technology and accumulated wisdom, with all the conquered civilizations and allied species under your banner, why is Princess Zyra still sitting on that throne instead of exploring what lies beyond the edges of known space?" The court erupted in sounds of shock and outrage. Several species made noises that Marcus's cultural training identified as expressions of extreme offense. Some of the Zephyrian courtiers took steps forward, their crystalline crowns blazing with indignation. But Princess Zyra held up one hand, and the court immediately fell silent. Her expression was unreadable, but Marcus noticed that the bioluminescence in her crown had shifted to a deeper, more intense pattern. "Explain your meaning," she said, and her voice carried a warning that was almost physical in its intensity. Marcus took a breath. This was the moment of maximum risk, but also maximum opportunity. "Your Majesty, you mentioned that the Empire has existed for millions of years and has accumulated vast knowledge and technology. You control thousands of star systems and have diplomatic relations with species across known space. Your military might is unquestioned, your cultural influence is universal, and your technological achievements are the standard by which all other civilizations measure themselves." He paused, letting his words sink in. "But in all that time, with all that power and capability, the Empire has remained essentially static. Yes, you've expanded your borders and refined your technologies, but you've never attempted to push beyond the fundamental boundaries that define your existence. You've never tried to break through to something genuinely new." The court was so silent that Marcus could hear the subtle humming of the energy systems that powered the massive structure around them. Princess Zyra's four hands had gone completely still, and her galaxy-filled eyes seemed to be looking through him rather than at him. "The Empire has mapped every star in this galaxy," Marcus continued. "You've cataloged every species, every resource, every possible strategic advantage. You know the location of every habitable world and the composition of every asteroid belt. You've achieved total knowledge of everything that exists within the boundaries of known space." He took a step closer to the princess, and several courtiers made warning sounds. But she gestured for them to remain still. "But here's what humanity has noticed," Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. "In all your millions of years of existence, you've never seriously attempted to reach beyond this galaxy. You've never mounted expeditions to explore what lies in the vast darkness between galaxies. You've never tried to contact civilizations that might exist in other cosmic structures entirely. You've achieved absolute mastery over a finite space, but you've never attempted to expand into the infinite." Princess Zyra's expression shifted subtly. For the first time since Marcus had entered the hall, she looked genuinely curious rather than merely amused or condescending. "And this," Marcus said, "is where humanity's perspective becomes valuable. We don't see mastery over known space as the end goal. We see it as the beginning. We look at your achievements and ask not, how can we match this, but what comes next? The princess walked back to her throne, but instead of sitting, she stood beside it with one hand resting on its armrest. You speak of ventures beyond our galaxy, as if they were merely matters of ambition, she said. Human, do you have any comprehension of the distances involved? The energy requirements? The technological challenges? Marcus nodded. We do, Your Majesty. Our scientists have run preliminary calculations. With current technology, even your advanced technology, such expeditions would indeed be impossible. The energy requirements would exhaust the resources of entire star systems. The timescales involved would span millions of years. The risks would be absolute. Then, you understand why such ventures have never been attempted. No, Your Majesty, Marcus said, and his voice carried clearly across the hall. We understand why they have never been completed. But the fact that they've never even been seriously attempted suggests a fundamental difference in how our species approach the concept of impossibility. The court stirred uneasily. Marcus was walking a dangerous line, but he could see that he had Princess Zyra's full attention now. Humanity has a saying, Marcus continued. We say that the impossible just takes a little longer. We don't accept that something cannot be done just because it has never been done before. We don't accept that current limitations define future possibilities. Princess Zyra descended the steps again, but this time her approach seemed thoughtful rather than predatory. You speak of impossibilities as if they were merely challenges to be overcome, she said. But surely even your optimistic species must acknowledge that some barriers are absolute. With respect, Your Majesty, we don't believe in absolute barriers. We believe in barriers that haven't been overcome yet. The princess stopped directly in front of Marcus again. Give me an example, she said. Show me how this allegedly unique human perspective would approach a problem that we consider impossible. Marcus had hoped the conversation would reach this point. Your Majesty, if humanity were tasked with mounting an expedition to the nearest galaxy, we wouldn't begin by trying to build ships that could make the journey. We would begin by asking what would need to be true for such a journey to be possible. Explain. The fundamental challenges are distance, time, and energy. The distances are so vast that even light-speed travel would take millions of years. The energy requirements exceed the output of entire stars. The timescales involved would outlast any individual civilization. Marcus paused, organizing his thoughts. But what if we approached the problem differently? What if instead of trying to send ships across the void, we send information? What if we develop techniques for transmitting not just data, but complete patterns, blueprints for matter and energy that could be received and reconstructed on the other side? Princess Zyra's crystalline crown pulsed with sudden interest. You speak of matter transmission across galactic distances. Not transmission, Your Majesty. Translation. Convert matter to information, transmit the information, and reconstruct the matter at the destination. The energy requirements would be immense, but finite. The timescales would be limited only by the speed of the transmission medium. And the risks would be manageable because multiple copies could be sent through different routes. The princess was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. Such techniques would require understanding of matter and energy at levels that we have not achieved. Yes, Marcus agreed. They would require breaking through barriers that currently seem absolute. But humanity's perspective is that barriers exist to be broken. Every impossibility is just a problem that hasn't been solved yet. And you believe your species is capable of developing such techniques? Marcus met her gaze directly. We believe that any species willing to accept that current impossibilities might be future possibilities is capable of developing such techniques. The question isn't whether it can be done. The question is whether anyone is willing to spend the centuries or millennia required to figure out how to do it. Princess Zyra turned and walked several steps away, her movements thoughtful and deliberate. The court remained silent. sensing that they were witnessing something significant. When the princess turned back, her expression had changed. The condescending amusement was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "You present an interesting argument, human," she said. "But arguments and theories are easily spoken. Actions and results are what matter in the end. If humanity truly possesses this unique perspective you claim, then prove it. Show me something that demonstrates your species' ability to achieve what others consider impossible." Marcus felt his heart rate increase. This was the moment he had both hoped for and dreaded. "Your Majesty, what kind of demonstration would you consider adequate proof?" Princess Zyra smiled, and for the first time, it seemed genuine rather than predatory. "I have been monitoring your species' development since you achieved faster-than-light travel. Our analysis indicates that your most advanced defensive technologies are approximately 50,000 years behind our current capabilities. Your personal armor and shielding systems are particularly primitive." She gestured again, and the energy field surrounding Marcus's uniform grew brighter. "What you are wearing represents the pinnacle of human defensive technology. Our preliminary scans indicate that it would provide minimal protection against our weapons, and no protection at all against our more advanced systems." Marcus nodded. "That's correct, Your Majesty." "Then, here is my challenge," Princess Zyra said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Remove your armor. Walk forward until you are within range of our defensive systems. If your species truly possesses the ability to achieve the impossible, then prove it by surviving what should, by all logical analysis, be unsurvivable." The court erupted in sounds of shock and excitement. This was clearly unprecedented. Marcus felt his mouth go dry as the implications sank in. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "are you asking me to deliberately expose myself to weapons that you've just stated would be lethal to humans?" "I'm asking you to prove your species' claims," the princess replied. "You say that humanity can achieve what others consider impossible. You say that barriers exist to be broken and that current limitations do not define future possibilities. Very well. Here is your opportunity to demonstrate whether these are merely words or whether they represent genuine capability." Marcus realized that everyone in the vast hall was staring at him. This had gone far beyond diplomatic protocol or formal negotiation. This was a test that would determine not just his own fate, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and the dominant power in the galaxy. "If I may ask, Your Majesty, what exactly would happen if I were to remove my armor and approach your defensive systems?" Princess Zyra's smile grew wider. "Our defensive systems are calibrated to neutralize any threat that approaches the celestial throne without proper clearance. They operate automatically and cannot be deactivated once a target has been identified. The energy output is sufficient to vaporize most forms of matter instantaneously." "I see," Marcus said quietly. "And you're suggesting that I voluntarily expose myself to these systems as a test of humanity's capabilities?" "I am suggesting," the princess replied, "that if your species truly possesses the unique perspective and problem-solving abilities you claim, then you should be able to find a solution to this challenge. After all, as you said, impossibilities are just problems that haven't been solved yet." Marcus looked around the hall one more time. The alien delegates were watching with obvious fascination. Some seemed horrified at the princess's suggestion, while others appeared eager to see what would happen. The Zephyrian courtiers maintained expressions of polite interest, as if they were watching a mildly entertaining performance. And in that moment, Marcus realized that Princess Zyra had created the perfect test. She was asking him to do exactly what he had claimed humanity could do: find a solution to something that appeared impossible. But she was also putting him in a position where failure would mean death. The irony was not lost on him. He had come here to convince the galaxy's most powerful civilization that humanity deserved a place at the cosmic table. Now he was being asked to literally bet his life on his species' alleged abilities. Marcus took a deep breath and began to unfasten his diplomatic uniform. The silence in the vast hall was absolute as Marcus's fingers worked at the fastenings of his diplomatic uniform. Each small click of a clasp or whisper of fabric seemed to echo like thunder in the crystalline chamber. Around him, hundreds of alien beings watched with fascination, horror, or simple curiosity as the human ambassador prepared to do something that, by all rational analysis, would result in his immediate death. Princess Zyra stood motionless beside her throne, her 4 arms hanging at her sides, and her galaxy-filled eyes fixed on Marcus with unwavering attention. The bioluminescent crown on her head had settled into a steady, intense glow that cast prismatic patterns across the walls of the chamber. Marcus's diplomatic uniform was more complex than it appeared from the outside. The seemingly simple dark blue fabric was actually composed of multiple layers, each serving a specific function. The outer layer provided basic environmental protection and could regulate temperature across a wide range of conditions. The middle layer contained a network of microcircuits that provided communication capabilities and basic biological monitoring. The inner layer was lined with a mesh of synthetic fibers that offered minimal protection against energy weapons and physical impacts. As Marcus removed each layer, he felt increasingly exposed. The court's attention was focused on him with an intensity that was almost physical in its weight. But more than that, he was removing the only protection he had in a chamber filled with beings whose casual capabilities far exceeded humanity's most advanced military technologies. "Human," Princess Zyra said as Marcus folded his outer layer and set it carefully aside. "You may halt this demonstration at any time. No one will consider it a failure of courage. The challenges facing your species are already significant. There is no shame in acknowledging that some barriers cannot be overcome." Marcus looked up from his task. "Your Majesty, with respect, I believe you may be missing the point of what humanity brings to the galaxy." The princess tilted her head slightly. "Explain." "You're offering me the opportunity to stop because you assume that I'm proceeding based on bravery or stubbornness or some other emotional motivation," Marcus said as he began removing the middle layer of his uniform. "But that's not why I'm continuing." "Then, why are you continuing?" Marcus paused in his disrobing and looked directly at the princess. "Because I've already identified a solution to the problem you've presented." A ripple of sound moved through the court. It wasn't laughter this time. It was something closer to shocked disbelief. Several of the alien delegates made noises that Marcus's cultural training identified as expressions of extreme skepticism. Princess Zyra's expression didn't change, but Marcus noticed that the patterns of light flowing across her skin had shifted to deeper, more complex configurations. "You claim to have solved a problem that should be fundamentally unsolvable given your species' technological limitations." "I claim to have identified a solution," Marcus corrected. "Whether I can implement it successfully remains to be seen. But that's the difference between humanity and the established civilizations of the galaxy. We don't spend extensive time calculating whether something is theoretically possible before attempting it. We try things and see what happens." The princess descended the steps of her throne again, moving with that characteristic flowing grace. "Tell me this solution you believe you have identified." Marcus resumed, removing his uniform as he spoke. "Your defensive systems are designed to neutralize threats that approach the throne without proper clearance. They operate automatically and cannot be deactivated once a target has been identified. The energy output is sufficient to vaporize most forms of matter instantaneously." "Yes, these are the parameters I described. But there's an assumption built into those parameters that reveals the solution," Marcus said. He had removed the middle layer of his uniform now and was working on the inner protective mesh. "The systems are designed to neutralize threats. They're programmed to identify and eliminate potential dangers to you and your court." Princess Zyra had stopped walking and was regarding him with intense focus. "Continue." "The solution is simple," Marcus said, pulling the protective mesh over his head and folding it neatly with the rest of his uniform. He now stood in nothing but basic undergarments that provided no protection whatsoever. I don't approach as a threat. The court erupted in sounds that Marcus couldn't interpret, but the tone suggested confusion and disbelief. Several delegates began speaking rapidly in their native languages, creating a cacophony of alien voices that filled the massive chamber. Princess Zyra held up one hand, and the court immediately fell silent. Explain how you intend to approach automated defensive systems not as a threat when those systems are specifically designed to identify and classify any unauthorized approach as threatening. Marcus began walking slowly toward the throne. With each step, he could feel the attention of the court focused on him like a physical force. Your Majesty, you said that the systems cannot be deactivated once a target has been identified. But you didn't say they couldn't be prevented from identifying a target in the first place. The princess's crystalline crown pulsed once, very brightly. Elaborate, automated systems, no matter how advanced, operate according to program parameters, Marcus said, continuing his measured approach. They're designed to identify threats based on specific criteria: energy signatures, movement patterns, biological markers, technological indicators. But those criteria are based on assumptions about what constitutes a threat. Marcus took another step forward. He was now close enough to see the individual facets in the crystalline formations that crowned the princess's head. The assumption built into your defensive systems is that any being approaching the throne without authorization is doing so with hostile intent. The systems are looking for the indicators that confirm this assumption: weapons, defensive technologies, aggressive behavior patterns, elevated stress responses. Another step. Marcus was now within what he estimated was the effective range of the defensive systems Princess Zyra had described. He should be dead already, vaporized by energies beyond his comprehension. But he continued walking. But what if someone approached with no weapons, no defensive technologies, no aggressive behavior, and no elevated stress response? Marcus asked, what if someone approached the throne exactly the way a non-threatening being would approach? Openly, calmly, with no attempt to conceal intentions or capabilities. Princess Zyra's 4 hands had gone completely still. Her galaxy-filled eyes were tracking Marcus's movement with absolute focus. You're attempting to convince our defensive systems that you represent no threat. I'm not attempting to convince them of anything, Marcus replied, taking another step. I'm simply ensuring that I actually don't represent a threat. I have no weapons. I have no armor. I'm making no aggressive movements. My biological indicators show calm, focus, rather than combat stress. By every reasonable measure, I am not behaving like someone who intends harm. The court was so silent that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. He was now less than 10 feet from the princess, well within the range where her defensive systems should have activated. But the systems are programmed to treat any unauthorized approach as threatening regardless of apparent intent, the princess said. Marcus smiled. Are they? Or are they programmed to treat unauthorized approaches that match threat profiles as threatening? There's a difference, and that difference represents the solution to your challenge. He took another step forward, 8 feet from the princess. Then 7, 6. You see, Marcus continued, his voice calm and conversational. Humanity has spent most of its existence dealing with automated systems that were programmed by other humans. We've learned that these systems, no matter how sophisticated, operate according to the assumptions built into them by their creators. And we've learned that the best way to deal with such systems isn't to fight them or try to disable them. It's to operate outside the assumptions they were designed to handle. 5 feet from the princess. 4, 3. Marcus stopped exactly 1 arm's length away from Princess Ura, the same distance he had maintained during their earlier conversation. He stood quietly, breathing normally, his posture relaxed and non-threatening. The court remained absolutely silent for several long seconds. Then Princess Zyra spoke, and Her voice carried a note of something that might have been admiration. "Impressive," she said. "Our defensive systems did indeed fail to identify you as a threat worthy of immediate neutralization. You approached openly, calmly, with no weapons or defensive technologies, displaying no hostile behavior patterns. By the criteria programmed into our systems, you presented no threat profile worthy of automated response." Marcus nodded. "The real insight isn't in the technical details, Your Majesty. It's in the recognition that every system, no matter how advanced, operates according to assumptions. If you can identify those assumptions and operate outside them, you can often achieve results that appear impossible. And this," the princess said thoughtfully, "is what you claim humanity can offer the galaxy. The ability to identify and transcend the assumptions that limit other civilizations." "Not just the ability," Marcus replied. "The willingness. Most species, once they achieve a certain level of technological and social sophistication, become invested in maintaining the systems and assumptions that brought them success. They become conservative, focused on optimizing existing solutions rather than discovering entirely new approaches." Princess Zara began walking slowly around Marcus again, but this time her examination seemed analytical rather than dismissive. "You suggest that humanity's youth and inexperience are actually advantages." "In certain circumstances, yes. We don't know what's supposed to be impossible, so we try things that more experienced civilizations wouldn't even attempt. We don't have established systems to protect, so we're willing to experiment with approaches that might disrupt existing methods. We're not invested in maintaining our current status because we're still figuring out what our status should be." The princess completed her circuit and stood facing Marcus again. "You've demonstrated that you can identify solutions to problems that appear impossible. But one successful example doesn't constitute proof of a general capability. How do I know that this wasn't simply luck or an isolated instance of clever thinking?" Marcus had expected this question. "Your Majesty, if you're willing, I'd like to present a more comprehensive demonstration, but it would require the participation of your court and possibly some of your technical specialists." The princess's crystalline crown pulsed with interest. "What kind of demonstration?" "The kind that would prove whether humanity's approach to problem-solving can be applied to challenges that have genuine significance for galactic civilization," Marcus replied. "But I should warn you, that would involve asking your most advanced scientists and engineers to acknowledge that some of their fundamental assumptions might be incorrect." Princess Zara was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy-filled eyes seeming to look through Marcus to something beyond him. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the vast hall. "Very well, human. You have my attention and the attention of this court. Present your comprehensive demonstration. Show us what humanity believes it can accomplish that we have not already considered and discarded as inadequate." Marcus bowed formally. "Thank you, Your Majesty. But before I begin, I need to ask you a question about your empire's greatest scientific achievement." "Which achievement specifically?" "The one that made your galactic dominance possible in the first place," Marcus said. "Your faster-than-light transportation technology. The systems that allow your ships to cross galactic distances in days where other species require months or years." Princess Zara nodded. "Our quantum fold drives are indeed the foundation of the Empire's reach and influence." "What is your question about them?" Marcus took a breath. This was the moment of maximum risk and maximum opportunity. "Your Majesty, how long has it been since your scientists made a fundamental breakthrough in faster-than-light travel? Not an incremental improvement or efficiency optimization, but a genuine breakthrough that opened up entirely new possibilities?" The princess was quiet for several seconds. Around the hall, Marcus could see alien delegates leaning forward with interest. This was clearly a question that had significance beyond its apparent simplicity. "It has been," the princess said carefully, "approximately 47,000 years since our scientists achieved the theoretical foundations that our current drives are based upon. Since that time, We have made countless improvements in efficiency, range, and capability. But you are correct that there have been no fundamental breakthroughs. And in that time, Marcus continued, have your scientists attempted to develop alternatives to quantum-fold technology? Have they explored entirely different approaches to faster-than-light travel? Why would they? The princess asked, but Marcus could hear uncertainty in her voice. Our quantum-fold drives are the most advanced transportation technology in known space. They are efficient, reliable, and capable of meeting all of our current needs. But are they capable of meeting your potential needs? Marcus asked. The needs you might have if you decided to expand your horizons beyond current limitations? Princess Zyra's expression shifted subtly. Explain your meaning. Your Majesty, quantum fold drives are indeed impressive technology, but they have limitations that become significant when you consider truly ambitious projects. They require enormous amounts of energy for long-distance travel. They're limited by the quantum characteristics of local space-time, and they become increasingly inefficient as distances approach intergalactic scales. The princess nodded slowly. These are known limitations. Our scientists have calculated that quantum fold technology, even with theoretical perfect efficiency, will be inadequate for travel beyond our galactic boundaries. Exactly, Marcus said. So the technology that made your galactic empire possible is also the technology that limits your empire to this galaxy. The solution that solved all your previous problems has become the barrier that prevents you from solving future problems. The court stirred uneasily. Marcus was suggesting that the Zephyrian Empire's greatest technological achievement was also a limitation, which was a concept that clearly made many of the delegates uncomfortable. You're suggesting that our scientists should abandon technologies that have served us successfully for thousands of millennia in favor of unproven alternatives that may not work at all, Princess Zyra said. I'm suggesting that your scientists should explore alternatives while continuing to use the technologies that work, Marcus replied. But, more importantly, I'm suggesting that they approach the problem from a completely different perspective. Which perspective is that? Marcus gestured toward the vast hall around them. Your Majesty, every being in this chamber assumes that faster-than-light travel is necessary for interstellar and intergalactic exploration and colonization. But that assumption may be limiting your ability to see other solutions. Princess Zyra's four hands had gone still again. Elaborate. What if you could achieve the practical effects of faster-than-light travel without actually moving matter across space at super light speeds? Marcus asked, what if you could be present in multiple locations simultaneously without traveling between them? What if you could influence events across galactic distances without ever leaving this chamber? The princess was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. You're describing capabilities that would require technologies we do not possess. I'm describing capabilities that would require different approaches to problems you've already solved, Marcus corrected. Your civilization has mastered energy manipulation, quantum mechanics, and space-time engineering at levels that humanity can barely comprehend. You have the technological foundations. You're just not applying them in ways that transcend your current limitations. Give me a specific example. Marcus had been hoping the conversation would reach this point. Your Majesty, your scientists have achieved perfect matter-to-energy conversion and energy-to-matter reconstruction. You can skin any object or being at the quantum level and create an exact duplicate from raw materials. This technology is what allows your quantum fold drives to function. They don't actually move ships through space. They reconstruct them at the destination. Princess Zyra nodded. This is correct. But your scientists use this technology only for transportation applications. They skin a ship, transmit the pattern through folded space-time, and reconstruct it at the destination. The process is limited by the range of your fold networks and the energy requirements of pattern transmission. Again, correct. But what if you separated the scanning and reconstruction processes? Marcus asked. What if you could transmit patterns across any distance using methods that don't require folded space-time? What if you could create reconstruction facilities in target locations before sending the patterns? The princess's crystalline crown began pulsing with a complex pattern that Marcus had never seen before. Around the hall, several of the alien delegates were making sounds that suggested intense interest. You're describing a form of matter transmission that would operate independently of our current transportation networks, the princess said slowly. I'm describing a form of existence that would operate independently of the limitations of physical location, Marcus replied. Imagine being able to reconstruct yourself, not a copy, but actually yourself, at any location where you have established reconstruction facilities. Imagine being able to exist simultaneously in multiple locations, with your consciousness coordinated across all instances. Imagine being able to explore the universe not by traveling to distant locations, but by simply deciding to exist there. The court was completely silent now. Marcus could see that his words were having an impact that went far beyond simple technological speculation. Such capabilities would require fundamental advances in consciousness transfer and multi-location coordination, Princess Zyra said. Technologies that we have not developed. Technologies that you haven't needed to develop because your current transportation systems were adequate for your current goals, Marcus said. But if your goals expanded to include genuine galactic and intergalactic exploration, these technologies would become necessary. And the theoretical foundations for them already exist within your current scientific understanding. The princess began walking again, but this time her movements seemed agitated rather than thoughtful. You're suggesting that our scientists should undertake research programs that might require centuries or millennia to complete, with no guarantee of success, in order to develop capabilities that we don't currently need. I'm suggesting that your scientists should undertake research programs that might open up possibilities that you can't currently imagine, Marcus replied. But more than that, I'm suggesting that humanity could contribute to those research programs in ways that might accelerate their completion. Princess Zyra stopped walking and turned to face Marcus directly. Ow! Because we approach these problems without the assumptions that limit your scientists, Marcus said. We don't know what's supposed to be impossible, so we're willing to try approaches that your experts would dismiss as inadequate. We're not invested in protecting existing technologies, so we're willing to explore alternatives that might disrupt current systems. And we're not bound by the theoretical frameworks that define what your scientists consider possible. The princess was quiet for several long seconds. Then she asked, what specific contribution do you believe humanity could make to such research programs? Marcus smiled. Your Majesty, we've already made a contribution. We've identified the research programs themselves. Your scientists have been so focused on optimizing existing solutions that they haven't seriously explored the alternatives that could transcend current limitations. Sometimes it takes an outside perspective to see what insiders have become blind to. Princess Zyra looked around the vast hall, taking in the hundreds of alien delegates who were listening to this conversation with obvious fascination. When she looked back at Marcus, her expression had changed again. You present compelling arguments, human, but arguments and theoretical possibilities are not sufficient to establish the value of your species' contributions to galactic civilization. If you truly believe that humanity can help solve problems that have challenged our greatest minds, then demonstrate it. What kind of demonstration would you consider adequate? The princess smiled, and this time Marcus could see genuine anticipation in her expression. Help us solve a real problem, not a theoretical exercise or a philosophical challenge, but an actual issue that has practical significance for the Empire and its subjects. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What problem specifically? The Andromedans, Princess Zyra said, and her voice carried to every corner of the hall. A species from outside our galaxy that has been sending increasingly aggressive probe ships into our space. We know almost nothing about them, except that their technology appears to be comparable to or possibly superior to our own. Our attempts at communication have failed, and our defensive measures have been only marginally effective. If your species truly possesses unique problem-solving capabilities, then help us determine how to deal with a threat that our traditional approaches have failed to address. Marcus felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders again. The princess had just presented him with a challenge that could determine not just humanity's place in the galaxy, but potentially the survival of galactic civilization itself. And as he looked into her galaxy-filled eyes, he realized that he was eager to accept Part 3. The vast crystalline chamber had been transformed into something resembling a military command center. Holographic displays materialized throughout the space, showing star charts, tactical analyses, and three-dimensional representations of unknown vessels that moved through space with geometries that hurt to look at directly. The alien delegates who had gathered to witness Marcus's diplomatic presentation now found themselves observing something far more significant: a war council that could determine the fate of galactic civilization. Princess Zyra stood at the center of the chamber, her four arms moving in complex patterns as she manipulated data streams with casual expertise. The bioluminescent crown on her head had shifted to deep blue patterns that pulsed in synchronization with the holographic displays around her. Marcus stood beside her, still wearing only his basic undergarments, but no one in the chamber seemed to find his appearance unusual anymore. The gravity of the situation had transcended conventional diplomatic protocols. The first probe appeared in our outer territories 18 months ago, the princess said as star charts materialized above their heads. Red indicators marked the locations of detected incursions, creating a pattern that spread across several sectors of space. Initial analysis suggested it was a scout vessel from an unknown civilization. Our response was routine, attempts at communication followed by polite but firm requests to identify themselves and state their intentions. Marcus studied the holographic displays with intense focus. The probe locations formed a pattern, but it wasn't immediately obvious what that pattern might represent. "What was the result of your communication attempts?" "Complete silence," the princess replied. The vessel ignored all transmissions across every frequency range and communication protocol known to galactic civilization. It didn't acknowledge our presence or react to our attempts at contact in any way. It simply continued its activities. "What activities specifically?" Princess Zyra gestured, and the holographic display zoomed in on one of the red indicators. A three-dimensional representation of a probe vessel materialized in the air between them. Marcus stared at it for several seconds before realizing that his eyes were having difficulty processing its shape. The vessel seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions, with surfaces that folded in ways that suggested geometries beyond normal space-time. "Scanning," the princess said. Deep, comprehensive scanning of everything in the system. They examined every planet, every asteroid, every artificial structure. They cataloged all energy signatures, all biological markers, all technological indicators. They created complete profiles of our capabilities and resources. And then they left. The probe simply vanished from our sensors without any indication of where it went or how it departed. Our analysis suggested that it had either been destroyed or had somehow moved beyond the range of our detection capabilities instantaneously. Marcus walked closer to the holographic probe, trying to make sense of its impossible geometry. "How long did the scanning process take?" 47 hours for a complete system analysis, Princess Zyra replied, during which time the probe ignored all our attempts at interaction. It neither responded to communication nor reacted to defensive measures. Defensive measures? The princess's expression grew grim. When communication failed, we attempted to intercept the probe for direct examination. Our most advanced patrol vessels were unable to match its maneuverability, and our weapons had no apparent effect on its hull. The probe continued its activities as if our fleet didn't exist. Marcus nodded slowly. "And since then, the incursions have increased in frequency and scale," the princess said. The holographic display shifted to show a timeline of probe activities. We now detect an average of 3 new probes per month, appearing in systems across our territory. Each one follows the same pattern: comprehensive scanning followed by mysterious departure. And each probe appears to be more advanced than the previous ones. More advanced how? Faster scanning, deeper analysis, better evasion capabilities. The latest probes complete their system analyses in less than 12 hours and seem to anticipate our defensive measures before we implement them. It's as if they're learning from each encounter and adapting their capabilities accordingly. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with his minimal clothing. Has there been any pattern to the systems they're targeting? That's what concerns us most, Princess Zyra replied. She gestured, and the star chart expanded to show the broader region of space. The probes aren't targeting random systems. They're systematically scanning our most strategically important locations: major fleet bases, research facilities, core industrial worlds. They're building a comprehensive intelligence picture of the Empire's capabilities and vulnerabilities. The implications were obvious and terrifying. Marcus looked around the chamber, noting the expressions of concern on the faces of the alien delegates. This wasn't just a mystery. It was a potential prelude to invasion by forces with technology that exceeded even the Zephyrian Empire's advanced capabilities. What conclusions have your military analysts reached? Marcus asked. That we are facing reconnaissance activities by a hostile civilization with technological capabilities that may be superior to our own, the princess replied bluntly. The systematic nature of the scanning, the apparent immunity to our defensive measures, and the progressive advancement in probe capabilities all suggest that we are being studied by potential enemies who are preparing for some form of large-scale military action. And what recommendations have they made? Princess Zyra's crystalline crown pulsed with darker colors. Immediate mobilization of our defensive fleets, acceleration of military research programs, and preparation for the possibility of galactic-scale conflict. Our strategists estimate that we have perhaps 6 months before the reconnaissance phase concludes and active hostilities begin. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the holographic displays around him. The data was extensive and clearly represented months of careful analysis by some of the most advanced minds in the galaxy. But as he looked at it, he began to see patterns and assumptions that suggested alternative interpretations. Your Majesty, Marcus said finally, may I ask what evidence specifically supports the conclusion that these probes represent hostile reconnaissance? The princess turned to look at him with surprise. Evidence? Human, the evidence is comprehensive and overwhelming. Unknown vessels are systematically scanning our most sensitive facilities while refusing all communication and ignoring our defensive measures. What other interpretation could there be? Several, actually, Marcus replied. But let me ask some specific questions first. Have any of the probes taken any aggressive actions beyond refusing to acknowledge your presence? Aggressive actions? Have they attacked any of your vessels or facilities? Have they interfered with your operations? Have they caused any damage or disruption beyond their simple presence in your space? Princess Zyra was quiet for a moment. No, she admitted. They have taken no overtly hostile actions. They scan and depart without causing any direct harm. Have they attempted to evade or hide their activities? No, they operate openly and make no apparent effort to conceal their presence or activities. And have they made any attempts to gather intelligence beyond the basic scanning activities you've described? Have they tried to access your communication networks, infiltrate your facilities, or capture any of your technology or personnel? Again, no. Their activities appear to be limited to passive scanning. Marcus nodded. And the fact that they're becoming more efficient at scanning, is it possible that this represents learning how to perform their activities more effectively rather than preparation for hostile action? The princess's 4 hands had gone still as she considered these questions. Around the chamber, Marcus could see that the alien delegates were listening with obvious interest. "You're suggesting," the princess said slowly, "that we may have misinterpreted the nature of these activities. I'm suggesting that your military analysts have made assumptions based on their training and experience," Marcus replied. "They've interpreted unknown activity according to familiar patterns of reconnaissance and military preparation. But what if the activity doesn't fit those patterns? Explain your alternative interpretation." Marcus gestured toward the holographic displays. "Your Majesty, everything you've described is consistent with a very different explanation. What if these aren't reconnaissance probes preparing for invasion? What if there's something else entirely? Such as, what if they're attempts at communication?" The chamber fell completely silent. Princess Zyra stared at Marcus for several long seconds before responding. "Communication? Human, these vessels have ignored every attempt at communication for over 18 months. They've ignored every attempt at communication using methods that we recognize as communication," Marcus corrected. "But what if they're trying to communicate using methods that we don't recognize? What if the scanning activities themselves are their form of communication?" The princess's crystalline crown began pulsing with rapid, complex patterns. "Elaborate. Think about it from their perspective," Marcus said. "They encounter a galactic civilization with technology that may be completely different from their own. They want to establish communication, but they have no common language, no shared protocols, no mutual understanding of how communication should work." Marcus began walking among the holographic displays, gesturing as he spoke. "So what do? They start by learning about us. They scan our systems to understand our technology, our capabilities, our activities. They study how we build things, how we organize ourselves, how we respond to unknown situations. But they ignore our attempts to communicate with them, because our attempts at communication don't provide them with the information they need," Marcus replied. "We're trying to talk to them using our communication methods, radio transmissions, light patterns, mathematical sequences. But maybe they're not equipped to understand those methods any more than we're equipped to understand theirs." Princess Zyra was quiet for a moment. "You're suggesting that the scanning activities are their attempt to learn how to communicate with us." "I'm suggesting that the scanning activities might be their form of communication," Marcus said. "Think about what they're doing. They're systematically studying our civilization, learning about our capabilities and activities. From their perspective, they might be saying, 'We want to understand you. We want to learn about you. We want to establish a relationship based on mutual knowledge and understanding.'" The princess walked to one of the holographic displays and manipulated it with one of her hands. The timeline of probe activities appeared in the air between them. "But why haven't they tried to reciprocate? Why haven't they allowed us to scan them in return?" Marcus smiled. "Who says they haven't?" "Explain." "Your Majesty, you mentioned that the probes have been becoming progressively more advanced. What if that advancement isn't just about becoming more efficient at scanning? What if they're deliberately revealing more advanced capabilities to us over time?" The princess's eyes widened slightly. "You think they're showing us their technology?" "I think they might be trying to establish a dialogue based on mutual demonstration of capabilities," Marcus replied. "They show us their scanning technology, their propulsion systems, their defensive capabilities. In return, you show them your response protocols, your fleet movements, your defensive technologies. Both sides learn about each other through observation rather than direct communication." Princess Zyra manipulated the holographic displays again, bringing up detailed analyses of the probe technologies. "If this interpretation is correct, then our military responses may have been sending the wrong message entirely." "What messages have you been sending?" "That we consider them a threat to be neutralized," the princess said quietly. "That we respond to unknown contact with military force. That we prefer confrontation to cooperation." Marcus nodded. "And from their perspective, you might be the hostile civilization that responds to peaceful contact attempts with military action." The implications hung in the air like a physical presence. If Marcus's interpretation was correct, then the Zephyrian Empire had spent 18 months treating potential allies as enemies and responding to communication attempts with increasingly aggressive military measures. But This is all speculation, Princess Zyra said. How can we determine whether your interpretation is correct? The same way humanity approaches most problems, Marcus replied. We try something and see what happens. What do you propose? Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the holographic displays and the assembled alien delegates. We change our approach entirely. Instead of treating the probes as hostile reconnaissance, we treat them as communication attempts. Instead of responding with military force, we respond with information sharing. Meaning, the next time a probe appears, instead of trying to intercept it or drive it away, we facilitate its activities. We provide it with complete access to scan whatever it wants to scan. We transmit detailed information about ourselves, our civilization, our intentions. And, most importantly, we make it clear that we want to reciprocate, that we want to learn about them the same way they're learning about us. Princess Zyra was quiet for a long time, her galaxy-filled eyes focused on something beyond the holographic displays. When she spoke, her voice carried a note of uncertainty that Marcus hadn't heard from her before. Such an approach would represent a complete reversal of our current policies, she said. It would require convincing our military leadership that potential enemies should be treated as potential allies. It would mean abandoning defensive measures that we've spent months implementing. And if your interpretation is wrong, it could leave us completely vulnerable to the very invasion that our analysts believe is imminent. Yes, Marcus agreed. It would require exactly the kind of risk-taking that established civilizations tend to avoid. The princess looked at him with an expression that might have been admiration or concern. And if I were to authorize such an approach, what assurance could you provide that it would succeed? Marcus met her gaze directly. None whatsoever. It might fail completely. The probes might actually be hostile reconnaissance, in which case our new approach could be catastrophic. Or they might be something else entirely that neither of us has considered. Then, why are you recommending it? Because the potential benefits justify the risks, Marcus replied. If I'm right, then you're about to establish contact with a civilization whose technology appears to be equal or superior to your own. The scientific, cultural, and strategic implications of such contact could transform the entire galaxy. And if I'm wrong, then you're no worse off than you are now. You're already preparing for the possibility of galactic-scale conflict. Princess Zyra walked back to the center of the chamber, her movements thoughtful and deliberate. You're asking me to bet the security of the Empire on a theory that has no supporting evidence beyond your interpretation of ambiguous data. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that your current approach is based on assumptions that might be incorrect, Marcus said. And I'm offering to take personal responsibility for the consequences if those assumptions prove to be right. Personal responsibility? Marcus looked around the chamber one more time, then back at the princess. Your Majesty, if you're willing to authorize the approach I've described, then I volunteer to be the primary contact when the next probe appears. I'll be the one who attempts to establish communication. If the probe is indeed hostile, then I'll be the one who suffers the consequences of that error. The princess stared at him for a long moment. You're volunteering to potentially sacrifice your life to test a theory about alien communication methods. I'm volunteering to do exactly what I came here to do, Marcus replied. To demonstrate that humanity can offer solutions to problems that seem impossible. To show that our perspective has value that justifies our place in galactic civilization. Princess Zyra was quiet for several minutes, her crystalline crown pulsing with complex patterns as she considered the implications of what Marcus had proposed. Around the chamber, the alien delegates waited in tense silence. Finally, the princess spoke. Very well, human. I will authorize a trial of your proposed approach. When the next probe appears, we will attempt to establish communication using the methods you've described. And you will indeed be our primary contact. Marcus felt a mixture of anticipation and terror. He had committed himself to a course of action that could result in his death, but could also result in the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in galactic history. However, Princess Zyra continued, there will be conditions. You will not approach this situation alone. You will be accompanied by a full scientific and diplomatic team. You will have access to our most advanced communication technologies. And if at any point the situation appears to be developing in a hostile direction, our defensive protocols will take precedence over your experimental approach. Marcus nodded. I understand and accept those conditions. The princess gestured, and the holographic displays around the chamber began showing new information: communication protocols, scientific analysis tools, and diplomatic procedures. Our monitoring stations indicate that a new probe typically appears every 7 to 10 days. If the pattern holds, we should have another contact within the next week. And until then, you will work with our scientists and diplomatic specialists to develop the most effective approach for your communication attempt, the princess replied. You will also undergo briefings on everything we know about the probe technologies and capabilities. And you will prepare yourself for the possibility that your theory about peaceful communication is wrong and that you are about to make first contact with a hostile alien intelligence. Marcus looked around the chamber one final time. The impossible had happened. He had come to the Zephyrian court to convince them that humanity deserved a place in galactic civilization. Instead, he had found himself volunteering to potentially sacrifice his life to prevent galactic war. But as he met Princess Zyra's galaxy-filled gaze, he realized that this was exactly what he had hoped for. This was humanity's chance to prove that they could contribute something genuinely valuable to the cosmic community. This was their opportunity to demonstrate that their unique perspective could solve problems that had challenged the greatest minds in the galaxy. In less than a week, Marcus would discover whether that perspective was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy, or the delusion that would cost him his life. The research facility orbiting the fourth planet of the Kepler 442 system had been transformed into something resembling a combination of scientific laboratory and military command post. Banks of monitoring equipment lined the walls, their displays showing real-time sensor data from dozens of automated observation platforms scattered throughout the system. Communication arrays powerful enough to transmit across galactic distances stood ready to broadcast on every frequency range known to science. And in the center of it all, Marcus stood wearing what the Zephyrian scientists had described as the most advanced communication and protection suite ever assembled. The suit was unlike anything humanity had ever developed. Instead of bulky armor plates or obvious technological components, it appeared to be made of the same opalescent material as Princess Zyra's skin. The surface shifted between different colors and patterns, responding to Marcus's biological rhythms and mental state. According to the scientists who had designed it, the suit could provide complete environmental protection, enhance communication across multiple dimensional layers, and offer defensive capabilities that could theoretically protect him against weapons that could crack planets. But, more importantly, the suit was designed to make Marcus appear as non-threatening as possible while still providing maximum protection. Every aspect of its design had been optimized to avoid triggering aggressive responses from unknown alien intelligences, while ensuring that he could survive contact with technologies that existed beyond current understanding. Princess Zyra stood beside him, her four arms manipulating holographic displays that showed the complete status of their monitoring network. The bioluminescent crown on her head was pulsing with rapid, complex patterns that Marcus had learned indicated intense concentration mixed with barely controlled anxiety. Probe contact in approximately 4 minutes, announced Dr. Thylan, the Zephyrian xenobiologist who was leading the scientific team. His crystalline formations were glowing with excited anticipation as he monitored the sensor readings. Emergence signature matches previous patterns. Displacement distortion followed by immediate active scanning. Marcus checked his communication systems one final time. He now had access to transmission capabilities that could broadcast across 47 different dimensional layers, using everything from conventional electromagnetic radiation to exotic quantum entanglement protocols. If the unknown aliens were capable of receiving communication through any method known to galactic science, he should be able to reach them. Remember, Princess Zura said quietly, your primary objective is to establish that we recognize their activities as communication attempts and that we wish to reciprocate. Do not attempt complex philosophical discussions or detailed technical exchanges. Simple concepts expressed clearly. Marcus nodded. They had spent 6 days preparing for this moment, developing communication protocols and testing equipment that had never been used for this purpose. The entire approach was experimental, based on theories that had no supporting evidence beyond Marcus's interpretation of ambiguous data. Probe contact in 2 minutes, Dr. Thylan announced. All monitoring stations report ready status. Communication arrays are active and standing by. Marcus felt his pulse quicken despite the suit's biological regulation systems. Everything that had led to this moment, his arrival at the Zephyrian court, his demonstration with the defensive systems, his analysis of the probe activities, all of it would be validated or proven catastrophically wrong in the next few minutes. Contact, Dr. Thylan said suddenly. Probe has appeared in grid sector 7 Alpha. Distance approximately 4 million kilometers and closing. Holographic displays throughout the facility immediately shifted to show the new arrival. Marcus found himself looking at the same impossible geometry that had challenged his perception during the briefings, a vessel that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could process, with surfaces that folded and connected in ways that suggested technologies beyond current scientific understanding. It's larger than the previous probes, Princess Zyra observed, and the energy signatures are significantly more complex. Consistent with the pattern of progressive advancement, Dr. Thylan replied. But the scanning activities appear to follow familiar protocols. Wait, he paused, studying his displays more intently. The scanning pattern is different. It's not conducting the usual systematic analysis of system resources and facilities. What is it scanning? Marcus asked. Us, Dr. Thylan said with obvious surprise. The probe is focusing its scanning activities specifically on this facility. It's conducting detailed analysis of our communication arrays, our monitoring equipment, and... He paused again. And you, Ambassador Chun. It's conducting extremely detailed scans of your location and biological signatures. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the facility's temperature control. It knows I'm here specifically? It appears to, Princess Zura said, her voice carrying a note of concern. The scanning intensity focused on your position is unlike anything we've recorded from previous probe activities. Marcus looked at the holographic representation of the impossible vessel. If his theory about communication was correct, then the probe's focus on him might indicate that it recognized his presence as something significant. But if his theory was wrong, and the probes were indeed hostile reconnaissance, then he might have just painted himself as a priority target. Beginning communication attempts, Marcus said, activating his suit's transmission systems. Broadcasting standard mathematical progressions across all frequency ranges. He transmitted the basic sequence that galactic civilization had been using for first contact attempts for millennia. Prime numbers, mathematical constants, and simple geometric relationships that should be recognizable to any intelligence capable of spaceflight. The communication arrays around the facility amplified his transmission and broadcast it toward the probe using every available method. The probe continued its scanning activities without any apparent response to the transmission. Marcus waited 30 seconds, then began the second phase of his communication attempt, transmitting technological demonstration protocols, showing them our scanning capabilities and scientific methods. He activated a sequence that demonstrated the facility's sensor capabilities, broadcasting detailed analysis of the probe's own structure and energy signatures back toward it. The idea was to show that humanity and its allies possess scientific capabilities worthy of respect, while also indicating that they recognized and appreciated the probe's own technological achievements. Again, no apparent response. Marcus felt doubt beginning to creep into his mind. Perhaps his theory about communication had been wrong. Perhaps the probes really were hostile reconnaissance, and he was about to face the consequences of his misinterpretation. But then Dr. Thylan made a sound that Marcus had learned indicated extreme excitement. Ambassador, Dr. Thylan said rapidly. The probe has ceased its scanning activities. It's transmitting. The holographic displays around the facility immediately shifted to show the incoming transmission. But instead of the communication protocols that Marcus had been sending, the probe was broadcasting something completely different. What is it transmitting? Princess Zyra asked. Music, Dr. Thylan replied with obvious bewilderment. Complex mathematical harmonics arranged in patterns that suggest aesthetic rather than informational content. It's transmitting music. Marcus felt his understanding of the situation shift dramatically. The probe wasn't responding to his mathematical progressions or technological demonstrations. It was responding with art. Can you analyze the musical structures? Marcus asked. Preliminary analysis suggests incredibly complex compositional techniques, Dr. Thylan replied. Mathematical relationships that our musicologists would need months to fully understand. But the basic patterns suggest joy, excitement, greeting. Marcus made a decision that went completely against his briefings and training. Instead of following the established first contact protocols, he activated his suit's personal communication systems and began to sing. He chose a simple human song, a folk melody that his grandmother had taught him as a child. Nothing complex or sophisticated, just a basic tune that expressed contentment and peaceful intentions. His voice, amplified by the suit's systems and broadcast across multiple dimensional layers, filled the space around the facility with gentle, familiar harmonies. The probe's response was immediate and overwhelming. The transmission from the vessel shifted to include harmonics that complemented Marcus's song, creating musical combinations that were more beautiful and complex than anything he had ever heard. The probe was singing with him, adding layers and variations that enhanced and expanded the basic melody into something approaching artistic perfection. Incredible, Princess Zyra whispered. It's creating musical dialogue. Marcus continued singing, following the probes.